Microsoft Defender for databases helps protect cloud databases by detecting threats, identifying vulnerabilities, and improving security posture. In this module, you'll learn to enable Defender for Azure SQL and open source databases, configure vulnerability assessments and security baselines, and route alerts to security teams for faster investigation and response to incidents. Hi, I am Cio Rodriguez. At the end of this module, you should be able to, one, describe Defender plans and detection capabilities. Two, enable Defender for Azure SQL Databases at the subscription scope. Three, enable Defender for open source relational databases. Four, establish security baselines for Azure SQL. And five, send Defender detections to the security operations team. Let's get started. Here we are again at the Azure uh, the Microsoft Azure portal, portal.azure.com. We are working with implementing Microsoft Defender for databases. So we're going to click on Microsoft Defender. If this is the first time that you get into the Azure portal, just look for Microsoft Defender, and you're going to find it here. So the first thing that we need to do to configure this from scratch is you need to go to the bottom to what it says management, and then click on environment settings, and then here you'll configure either at the root level or at the subscription level. If a huge company and has a lot of subscriptions, then obviously the root tenant is the best practice there. But in our case, we're just going to do a subscription. We only have one subscription here. And it's important to understand that for any of this cloud workload protection, CWPP, of which databases is part of them, you need to have the Defender CSPM enabled. There are two DSPM types, and we have talked about this in previous videos, but the foundational or free CSPM that's on by default, but this is a paid subscriptions and a paid plan rather. Again, the Cloud Security Posture Management CSPM. Watch the previous videos if you haven't. And also the CSPM is broken into workloads depending on what it is that you have. You may want to protect servers. This is one of the most common, but if you don't have any storage accounts, then you don't need that. If you don't have databases, you don't need that. If you don't have Key Vault, whatever the case may be, you turn on whatever you have, everything turn on this tenant. But what we are going to look at right now is databases. We have looked at several of these, and by the end of this course, we would have looked at everything. But for now, we are concentrated on databases. And if you click on the select types, there are several types of databases that we're going to be discussing here. Defender for Cloud offers protection, again, for a variety of database resource types, both SQL servers and managed cloud database services. The first in the list is the Azure SQL Databases, and this applies to Azure SQL Database, single databases, and also Elastic Pools, Azure SQL Managed Instances, and Azure Synapse Analytics. So that piece, and it is important to understand this because you maybe ask, okay, so you need to enable Defender, Microsoft Defender for databases for this specific type of database, and you need to know which of these you're going to choose. The second type is the SQL servers on machines. And so this applies to SQL on Azure virtual machines, SQL servers on premise, and Azure Arc enable SQL servers. Only SQL Azure virtual machines and Azure Arc enable SQL servers are reflected on the resource count. So keep that in mind. And here you get information about price and all that. The third group is the applies to Azure database for PostgreSQL, flexible servers, Azure database for MySQL, flexible servers, and non-basic tier Azure database for PostgreSQL, MySQL, and MariaDB, single service, and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so open databases. And then the final type here is the Azure Cosmos DB, and this applies to Azure Cosmos DB SQL, core API accounts. For serverless accounts, the total uh, RU will be converted to provision throughout using a conversion factor, whatever the case may be. Anyways, but the important thing for the exam is to understand that, let's say that you have a question and the question says, well, you have a relational database, Postgre, whatever, and you need to protect that. Well, yes, you enable the databases component, but you only need this. You don't need any other thing if you only have open source relational databases. So you would turn off those. Well, by default, everything is off, right? You would turn on whatever it is that you need, and you click on continue and that kind of stuff. And there you go. So once you enable, so you enable the plan, there's not much you can do with respect to that. So that's there, right? Since we're here and we've seen this before, so those are the Defender plans that we were talking about. If we go into the security policies, and again, we've been here before, if you need to comply with regulations, this is where you would turn that on, whether it is NIST or ISO or PCI DSS, whatever the case may be. Here are all those standards. And then, so once you enable the Microsoft Defender for SQL, you will get a lot of stuff related to databases. So if I just type in SQL, for example, you would get a lot of recommendations related to the database component. And obviously, remember that these recommendations are based on the standards that you have enabled. So by default, the only recommendation that we have enabled here is the Microsoft Cloud Security Benchmark, or MCSB, which this basically tracks Microsoft Cloud Security Benchmark controls in the compliance dashboard. So that's what it does. But once you enable those standards, then, and once you enable any workload for that matter, then the recommendations, you can see that over there. And of course, we talked about this before, you can create your custom standard or custom recommendation. A lot of companies have the stuff that's not covered by any standard. You can do that if you want to do that as well. We've also been here in which you can create email notifications for those alerts, and in terms of the workflow automation, you can do that here. and you could also configure this continuous export. So you can configure extreme export settings of Defender for cloud data to multiple export targets. Exporting Defender for cloud's data also enables you to use experiences such as integration with third-party SIEM and Azure Data Explorer, so that you want the SAC analyst group to be able to work with these logs, and also for compliance as well. So again, you can stream this to Event Hub, and you can choose whatever it is that you may not want to stream everything, because remember there is a cost involved with this. But whether it is security recommendations, secure score information, you may want to see that, security alerts, regulatory compliance, security attack path. This is a new component to the family security attack path. We talked about that. Not quite new, but anyway. So, and you can also choose export frequency. So whether it is the extreme updates, export updates in real time, and then snapshots, which export weekly, a snapshot of the data types selected onto the exported data types. Okay, and the export configuration, obviously you need a storage group where you want to do that, and the export target, you can uh, you know export to the subscription, the event hub name, whatever, if you have one. You need to have this set up before you're able to do all this thing. If you need more information about how to integrate these recommendations, these alerts, and security related stuff to a third party SIEM, then you can find information here as well. And also connect selected event hub to Azure Data Explorer. You can learn more on this information there. So all of that is here in the continuous export, and that's for Event Hub. The other one is the Log Analytics Workspace, and basically the same thing, depending on, although there's a couple of things here that are not available, but this is, some of the most important configuration that you need to do once you have uh, not just Defender Explorer for databases. This would be enabled previously. We talked about this when you first configure Microsoft Defender for whatever workload it is, then you would need to configure something like that. So now that we have enabled Microsoft Defender for SQL, let's now look into the databases themselves. So if we click on any of this databases or server, and from the database component, then we go into Microsoft Defender. We'll see, well, first of all, we'll see that the Microsoft Defender for SQL toggle, it's on. So that's there. And so here we see a couple of things enable at the subscription level. So that's fine. And then some settings will be there in a second. Vulnerabilities on related databases. 5 vulnerabilities were found, and you can see the some documentations about that, and there's more over here. But anyway, so you can directly go to the uh, vulnerabilities page to see what those vulnerabilities are. And then you can drill down into, so if I want to look at this high database recommendation, so I can click into it. And here it will give me information about what the problem is, and some remediation plan and the impact, and the query that you would do to configure that stuff. So a lot of information here when you drill down into those recommendations, right? Again, so you can look at on health databases, healthy databases, not applicable, and that kind of stuff. So going back into the Defender component from the database perspective, we can see here the security findings, also the recommendations, whether if there are security related alerts, they would also be there. Now, when you click on the settings component right here, this will bring you to, again, Microsoft, it's on, but one of the objective is to configure vulnerability assessment to establish security baselines for Azure SQL. And this is what we're looking at right now. So SQL vulnerability assessment is enabled via the express configuration. All databases will be scanned on a weekly basis. And you can learn more about this if you want to. There's some advanced threat protection settings for SQL alerts, in and stuff. And emails can be configured, sent by Defender for Cloud. So basic, if you want to learn more about this, then just click on the little circle here. But if I click on this link over here, then this will take me to the email configuration. By default, will send to the owner of this resource. But anyway, so you can configure this. Instead of coming here and looking at stuff, you want to be proactive. You want to be alerted, an email sent when any of these things happens. Okay, so that's what it's done there. And here in the vulnerability assessment, again, we saw that. Now, enable auditing for better threat investigation experience, since we were talking about auditing in the past. So, of course, you want to do that. So, if auditing is not enabled, this is something that you want to enable. And that was part of the conversation that we discussed later, actually before. Additional auditing, use Ledger for auditing and compliance. Ledger provides cryptographic proof of data integrity to auditor. This proof can help streamline the auditing process. And again, if you want to do that, click on the start over here, and then, basically this is the documentation on how that's done and that kind of stuff. But um, not sure if that's probably a new component. I remember seeing that way back, but um, I don't recall anything on the exam related to that. Anyways, so that's there you have it. That's what um, you know the Defender for Cloud it's all about. So if we go into, I don't need that, but let me come back into the okay, so this is where we are. Implement Microsoft Defender for databases. And so we look into exploring the Microsoft Defender database capabilities. We saw there what this does. And so again, Defender for databases, protect against SQL injection attacks, anomalous access, brute force attacks, and suspicious activity. All those things related to databases can be detected. And this is mapped to MITRE, the MITRE framework, initial access, persistence, data exfiltration. And here's more information about the different plans that we just discussed, right? So if you want to learn more about this, then you come to these pages. But we already talked about all this. That was one of those things. We enable Defender for SQL database at the subscription scope. Again, if you have many subscription, you may want to do it at the management scope. And this, and also you could enable it just at the resource level. You don't have to, if you just have one database that you want to protect and you don't want to enable the subscription label, you can do that. And it's important to understand the scope because you may be tested about that. So remember, the management group, covers everything, including the subscriptions. But if you do other subscriptions, and let's say that there are three subscriptions in management group, and you only protect one subscription, there are two subscriptions that are unprotected if you have databases on those, right? But anyway, so nice graph to look at the scopes right there, and enforce with policy. Okay, yeah. Almost forgot about this. Looking at Azure Policy to enforce Defender. We're gonna get to that in a second. But that's why I like to come to this units, because then make sure that we cover everything. So we also saw that Defender for Cloud extends threat detection beyond Azure SQL databases to include open source relational databases services and Cosmos and all that. So we talked about this. So whether it is, Azure, AWS, GCP, especially, GCP's, a lot of this is covered. Okay. So we saw all that during the configuration. Defender for Azure SQL. So here is the recognized key difference from Defender for Azure SQL databases. So again, make sure you quickly read into that to reinforce the learning. We went through the vulnerability assessment and some of the configuration. So, once you enable, needs to configure, you can do auto scan, and then findings are uh, categorized by severity. Obviously, if you are dealing with threats, then you start with the high, right? That kind of stuff. Um, Express configuration. Yeah, a lot of stuff here, but we cover most of that stuff. And then configure the routing. So we talked about the different routings, where do you want to send that? But these are the kind of things that you defend against. And we talked about email notification, a lot of stuff there. So going back, before we conclude this, there's another piece that um, we want to take a look at, and it's Azure Policy. And you can search for policy there, but we've been here many times before. There is a whole module just about Azure policies. So to configure stuff at a scale and to remediate at a scale, right? So let's say that you want to make sure, especially when you have a big environment, you have many subscriptions. So you want to configure Defender for servers to be disabled for resource. You want to configure SQL virtual machines to automatically install Microsoft Defender for SQL, and you want to do that at a scale, then this is where you would come over here. And if you want to apply this, then again, you choose the subscription or whatever the scope is it that you want to do. Here is the policy definition. You can use, you know, the overrides and exceptions. We talked about this before. And there you go. So we have talked about these parameters, the remediations, whether you need to use remediations and create remediation tasks, manage identity, of course, if you need to remediate stuff. So all of these things we've covered in a previous videos, but it's similar to um, Azure Policy, allows you to um, has definitions for every single component in Microsoft Azure. So here we're looking at the Defender components, but some of these things are similar to that. Okay, with that, we conclude this video, and we are, let's see. So we are here. We conclude this learning path. Okay, so great milestone. So this is learning path 5, and that was the last module. So we're done with that learning path. Next, we are going to cover. Remember, there's a lot more here. We're going to cover um, the implement network security controls in Azure. And a lot of people are waiting for this one, implement security for AI. We'll get there. We'll get there. I have a lot of people asking me, hey, are there any actually, there was one question somebody asked me in LinkedIn. And if you have questions, anything, you could either ask me on here on YouTube or on LinkedIn. But somebody, asked me, what's the difference between the AZ-500 and the SC-500? Well, the AZ-500 has been deprecated, so no longer there. So if we're planning to take the AZ, forget about that, because the SC-500 covers everything on the AZ-500 plus. This is the new component, basically. So anything that has AI in it, it's new on this certification exam. So anyway, but that's what we're going to cover. Next, we're going to go into network security, which is huge. So these are the modules. Segment and isolate Azure workloads using network security controls, centralize and enforce traffic inspections using Azure Firewall, secure remote and hybrid connectivity using VPN gateways and Microsoft Entra Private Access. Um, Entra Private Access also new. That was not there. I don't believe that it was there in the all AZ-500. And then eliminate public network exposure for Azure PaaS services. So these are the modules for the next learning path, and that's what we're going to cover. So thank you for watching, and I hope to see you on my next module.